Hello and welcome to Reality Check. Before we start, I want to tell you a little bit about our sponsor for this week. It's the iconic Chuck Norris, a guy I used to have on my bedroom wall. The martial artist hero who's still in his 80s and still kicking butt and still staying active. What's even more shocking is he's stronger, he can work out longer, and he even has plenty of energy left over for his grandkids. He did this by making just one change, and he says he still feels like he's in his 50s. His wife even started doing this one thing too, and she's never felt better. She says she feels 10 years younger, her body looks leaner, and she has energy all day. Chuck made a special video that explains everything. Make sure you watch it by going to chuckdefense.com/Ross. That's this link below this video. It will change the way you think about your health. Once again, that's chuckdefense.com/Ross. Now, let's get on and enjoy the show. G'day and welcome back to Reality Check. Well, today we've got a very special show. You will recall earlier this year I brought Jake Barber to the world. Jake Barber, the former intelligence insider who told the story of his role in the legacy retrieval program for UAPs. Jake told us at the time he was going to found an organisation in collaboration with other people called Skywatcher. And Skywatcher indeed has been in operation now for quite a few months. And I'm pleased to be able to reveal on today's program and welcome Matthew Pines, the commentator, geopolitical, national security commentator who we've welcomed to the show before. He's coming today in a new role as, if you like, let me get this right, Matthew, the official spokesperson for Skywatcher. Is that correct?
Strategic advisor, here to help them, with their overall messaging and communication and methodology. So really great to be on board and join the illustrious compadres at Skywatcher.
And Jake, welcome back. You're an old friend of the show. It's great to have you back on board.
Good day, Ross. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you for appearing. We're delighted to have you on board because I can tell you of all the things that people want to know about, it's Skywatcher. And one of the things I've admired about you, Jake, is you've been putting yourself out there on social media. You've been responding to questions. And here today is a good opportunity to get into the detail. First up, Matthew, as I understand it, you're about to release later this week a document which you call the Skywatcher Discovery Framework. It's a protocol for how you intend to investigate and corroborate or disprove the phenomenon. Take us through it, please. What is this Discovery Framework?
Yes, thanks for asking about that. And we hope to have that out shortly after this airs. So be on the lookout. Folks can dig into the details. I won't go into too much of that right now. But at the top level, it's a document really meant to anchor how we think about our overall approach to collecting data and then sharing our findings with the public, right? Skywatcher is not meant to do its work in the shadows. We want to do things in the open. We want to have a transparent and rigorous scientific approach that brings in all experts and folks that are observing these activities. But we want to apply the rigorous scientific method to our work and to how we communicate the level of confidence in our findings, right? Right now, we're in a sort of a zone of ambiguity and uncertainty around lots of UAP-related information and data, things that are mostly anecdotes. We want to provide a framework that can go from anecdotes, intriguing images, intriguing encounters or experiences, to definitive scientific validated conclusions that can be shared and that can be the basis for public conversations and public policy. So this document meant to sort of anchor where we think our current understanding is and the methodologies that we're putting to the test, but also recognize where we still have a lot of work to go, right? We're still at the early innings of this approach, and we want to show where we think we want to end up by the end of the year.
So, Jake, for the benefit of the audience that don't know what Skywatcher is, can you explain to us what Skywatcher is? What's your ambition? What's your goal? And how are you doing it?
Yeah, pretty much as Matt just outlined, but we want to move from a low level to a very high level with our exploration of what this phenomenon is. And that starts with the anecdotal side or the very personal or subjective side and move all the way from there all the way to a point of scientific discovery. And I like to point out that that anecdotal side is valuable. It catches a lot of heat, and it seems like we have a lot of that in the public domain, and most of the arguments are about anecdotal experiences. But that's still a very important place, because without that, we can't come up with theories, and that's also where our motivation comes from, because we need a good reason to deploy the scientific method to begin with. And so that starts with all of these things that people are experiencing at large. And so what Skywatcher is meant to do is to take all the people that can facilitate that process of moving from something worthwhile and interesting to a point that it becomes a scientific discovery and is now impacting reality and is integrated into our culture and everything else.
So at the heart of this is proof of perhaps the biggest story in human history, that potentially we may not be alone.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the possibilities of where this is going. And that's really exciting for all of us. I mean, we're all human. We're all in awe of that idea. But we have to be very careful about accepting whatever the outcome is. And it's not going to be anything boring, I'll tell you that. But exactly what it is and where it comes from, those possibilities keep broadening.
Haven't you already been doing quite a few months of work with Skywatcher? Where are you at the moment?
Yeah, well, we are actually literally out on the range today. I leave tomorrow. We're on our third day out on the range recording episode 3. As I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit here, episode 2 is going to be released on April 7th. But we have a budget to operate in the field for about 7 days a month. The 3 weeks in between, if you will, is spent planning and assessing and editing the experience from the 3 weeks prior. But it's been exciting. We've been very successful, and we look forward to going over and actually sharing some of the successes we've had last month, and then even they're happening today and tomorrow.
So Matthew, I want to take you through the levels of proof that you're going to work through. But before we get there, Jake, you say you've been successful. Where are you at the moment? Like, in terms of, I know, Matthew, you haven't been out on the range yet, but you're about to, you lucky fella. I'm looking forward to hearing from you about that. But what have you actually seen to date?
Yeah, I'll tell you. So episode 2 that releases April 7th is going to be the first time we introduce one of our key members who runs our technology side of the house, what we call our technology operations group. And in that episode, he is going to be our lead in taking everyone through what we call our 9 classes of UAP. And the 9 classes of UAP are what we use to try and separate and classify and differentiate between all the different things we're witnessing. And those 9 classes are really subcomponents of a broader, maybe 3 categories. And those 3 categories are something like actual craft, like machinery flying in the sky, to light phenomenon that can be crystals, beams, orbs, things that appear to be something like a plasma blob in the sky, all the way to flying creatures, like what might be a flying jellyfish or an interdimensional creature, as crazy as that sounds. But there is a class or a set of classes that falls under that category as well.
And Jake, forgive me for interrupting. Just to be clear on this, when you say these 9 classes, are these 9 classes that you have already recorded, seen?
Yes. So they're proprietary. It's our class system that we've come up with, and that's what we're going to be sharing. I think one of the classes that people are going to be most excited to see, because it's very well known and arguably one of the most famous and interesting UFO, UAP classes out there is the Tic Tac. So on April 7th, you'll get to see our interactions with the Tic Tac. We had a lot of success with the Tic Tac in episode 2, or the filming of that. It showed up for us several days in broad daylight, dropping from above 80,000 feet, as everyone has heard. We pick it up on our radar, we track it, we image it through a number of different means. And so that's going to be exciting to see, because that's one of the ones that holds the most promise for an exciting conclusion right now.
Now, I can't let this one go by. I'm
Don't let it go.
on
Let's
the edge
go.
of my seat. You talked about the jellyfish. Have you seen a jellyfish, and have you videoed a jellyfish?
Yeah, and why we call it a jellyfish? Like, we take a pretty humble, like, kindergarten approach to our classifications to make it simple for everyone. Like, it literally just looks like a jellyfish. It looks like a head of a mushroom with tentacles, and there seems to be like electrical pulses that go up and down between the head and the tentacles. And I don't want to get too much into it, because I want to allow my teammates that we're going to be introducing in episode 2 a chance to go into this. And they have a very specific story to tell there, and I don't want to spoil it for them, but
I can understand. You want to
Yeah.
save the best for later.
Yeah.
Can I ask you this, though? Of the 9, you talk about the three subclasses, if you like.
Yeah.
Can you categorize for us in a descriptive term the 9 classes that you're talking about?
No, I'll say that. I will just say again that the classes come from 3 broader categories. We've got basically what look like craft or machinery. You've got what are so anomalous, let's say, that they are just they put off what we can detect as some interesting light signature, from like a vibrating crystal to a pulsating blob to orbs. And then the last is, we don't know what they are, but it moves and behaves like what you would think a wild animal or a sea creature would behave, but it's in the sky, it's in the atmosphere.
So let's go to Matt now. So Matt, you have the task, I guess, of strategically advising this group on how to, I guess, collate and present this data in a way that is scientifically rigorous. And there are a number of levels. I think you've got 6 levels that you've set out in this framework that you've put together. What are those 6 levels?
Yes, and it's a good maybe to walk through with an example, right? Say take the jellyfish or the Tic Tac, right? Which is been seen in other videos, some officially released, some leaked with debate about their provenance. But at that level, you have an image, you have a clip of a video, you have maybe secondhand reports of the nature of that encounter or that observation. And that is sort of, in our schema, kind of like level 1, right? In a sense, it's not our data, right? We're taking somebody else's apparent data, and you can assess it, you can look at that, but it's hard to come up with like definitive scientific conclusions with just that amount of data, right? It's a good place to start, as Jake mentioned. It clearly is something that needs to be explained, but it doesn't allow you to make really much of anything in terms of a conclusion. So where we want to take the next step is, in level 2, essentially structured data collection, right? Which requires actually putting a lot of resources out into the field for a long period of time with specialized skills and equipment and analytic methodologies to collect data on those objects. And so that's really what Skywatcher is principally engaged in right now, is structured data collection, right? To bring out into a controlled environment, as much as you can control it, multiple different data collection modalities, different sensors, right? Radars, different multi-band infrared, electro-optical, multiple observers in different locations, trained observers in different platforms, and helicopters on the ground. And collecting information over a long period of time in order to build up essentially an evidence base, right? You get anomalous things, you see interesting things. Okay, and then you go to level 3, which is hypothesis testing. Okay, we have these different classes. We observed them under these different conditions. They came in response to these different interrogation modalities. This was the patterns we saw over time. This is the historical trend that we witnessed. This is the characteristics that are consistent in those different observations. That's how you build up an evidence base that then generates hypotheses around, okay, are these different classes fundamentally different? Are they just different manifestations of the same underlying phenomenon? And then we want to get to the point where we can then generate novel and rigorously formulated hypotheses against that data. And then you can produce that analysis. Then you can share your analysis. We think this observation that is on multiple sensors, that was confirmed by multiple different observers, that was seen in many different categories over time. This is a real observation of a highly anomalous object displaying performance characteristics or apparent morphologies that are truly anomalous and exotic, that have no apparent obvious explanation in terms of conventional aircraft or misidentification or bugs or whatever, right? So that's what we want to get to in level 3, is you have the data to be able to formulate hypotheses that then you can do your analysis and then share your analysis that demonstrates we think this is highly anomalous. And then level 4, get that to be peer reviewed, right? You want to get that independently tested, get others to sort of poke at your data, poke at your conclusions, try to assess, well, was this actually a misidentification of something that you didn't account for? Is there something in that environment that that otherwise could explain that? And ideally, you try to really poke as many holes as possible in that preliminary findings, and we'll publish our results, and we'll want to get folks to take a second crack at it. But ultimately, right, the scientific method is you have peer review, and if it stands up to scrutiny, then it becomes not a final conclusion, but it becomes something that is worthy of increasingly serious attention by policymakers, right? That had to take a look at this data, and other folks have to that have a responsibility to understand anomalous phenomenon have to then take a hard look at the data that's coming out of efforts like Skywatcher and decide, okay, is this something that we need to prepare for, that the public needs to understand is a potential reality as a phenomenon that isn't fictitious, isn't just a result of misidentifications, but is a real observable in nature. And then that can trigger other conversations on the public policy front where it's about digesting the reality of this different phenomenon. But I think we're still at that level 2 to level 3 to level 4 stage and basically our objective is to sort of get to that point by the end of the year.
Can I add something to that, Ross?
Yep, sure.
So yeah, we have what we call a transition criteria. So before we move from level 1 to level 2 or all the way up to level 6, we have established a criteria for ourselves. And what that means is that this could take a long time. We're not here to produce an entertainment piece. We aren't driven or motivated by putting out a certain pacing of episodes. We are here to do the hard work and focus on scientific discovery. And we're ultimately going to be limited by our own transition criteria on each one of these levels. And with 6 different levels, I can't tell you. What I can tell you is it's been very exciting so far, and level 1 and level 2 have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I'll say the last point is a picture or a video is almost never proof of anything, right? Yeah. The whole point is you need multiple different sensor sources, all corroborating the same object from different perspectives, showing anomalous behavior, showing anomalous morphologies, and being able to then validate that the sensors were not malfunctioning and that you see that repeatedly over time, right? And so it's not just a matter of, okay, show me some video of something, and that's going to be the slam dunk proof. It's you have to show your analysis, you have to show your work, which is this is the video, this was the radar, this was the infrared, this was the human observations, and then this was the consistent pattern that all points in the same direction over time. And then you can say, well, this is something anomalous. And we have high confidence that this object is real and is highly anomalous. And so you don't ever speak in terms of proof, you speak in terms of levels of confidence and the amount of independent, valid data that you're basing that confidence on.
This is good. I like the fact that you're not jumping to conclusions. And I think one of the things that's been thrown at Skywatcher is, you're keeping it all very much in the dark. It sounds to me like you're prepared to be transparent. Just for the sake of our audience, let's go through the levels that you've just described there. So level 1 is preliminary observation. Level 2 is structured data collection. Level 3 is analysis and hypothesis testing. Level 4 is independent verification and peer review. Level 5 is public disclosure and review. And level 6 is full disclosure and integration. Now, right. just so I can encapsulate this, one of the other things that's in your document is you've got a new term for what I would call the psionic inviting or summoning. And I can understand why you've changed the term, because it's a fairly loaded term. And you've got this new term, which is neuro-meditative. What are you calling it? What are you calling it, Jake?
Neuromeditative interaction, or we call our psionic assets neuromeditators. So
neuro-meditative interaction, that's what we previously have called psionic. And the other one is electromechanical signaling, which I've previously known as the dog whistle. When I interviewed you earlier this year, you referred to how in your previous role in the program, there was a device used known as the dog whistle.
Correct.
And so there's two different techniques here. One is electromechanical signaling, and the other is this neuro-meditative interaction.
Yeah, to go back to keeping it kindergarten, like we have machine-based calling and measurement, and we have man-based or human-based calling and measurement. And they're both used on both ends of that. So the neuromeditative process is also one that we use for data collection, if you will, not just the calling or luring process.
Now, this is doing my head in because, of course, we're talking at a time, and I think history will one day record this and show this. We're talking at a time where officially, Jake and Matt, the Pentagon categorically denies any knowledge of human interaction with a non-human intelligence, or at least with an extraterrestrial intelligence. You are saying that on obviously the research that you're doing at the moment, Skywatcher is now at the point where it is detecting something.
Yeah.
Is it discernibly anomalous? Are you at the stage where you can say that what you're looking at is anomalous?
Well, in defense of the Defense Department, this is bigger than a defense subject. So, maybe they're not the best ones to be the subject matter experts on this holistically anyways. They have a very narrow focus, and we want them focused on national defense. The more we get into this and the more broadly we look at it and the more scrupulously we look at it, the more we realize it has implications way beyond technology that could be used for defense or offense. And so, this is why we're taking this approach. We're trying to involve people from all aspects of life and a variety of scientists. So scientists themselves are very diverse. What you really have is a group of individuals who have a varying degree of expertise and the ability to deploy the scientific method. And where that becomes really helpful for us, our primary focus right now from a creative and innovation standpoint comes by in the form of experiments. We need a lot of experiments, and we need all heads and hands on deck in order to come up with the right set of experiments that will allow us to meet that transition criteria to move through the levels.
And Ross, to your question, I would say in the discovery framework paper, we give a sort of a preliminary assessment of where we think these two techniques sit. So into your answer, like how far we've got in terms of levels of confidence in demonstrating the reality of these phenomenon. The electromechanical signaling, the sort of machine calling dog whistle, we have assessed at level 3, right? In the sense that we have a good evidence base of it being reliably effective at resulting in UAP phenomenon of those 9 characteristic classes appearing directly overhead, repeatedly over many, many different sort of trial runs. And so that we have high confidence is apparently effective, right? We don't have a good scientific hypothesis as to the underlying mechanism of its effect or what sort of conditionalities you place on that effect. Whereas the neuromeditative interaction we have at level 2, right? We have strong, I would say, in the technical jargon, sort of phenomenological evidence, right? The first person experience of the personnel on the team performing these activities, that it is effective. And it seems in certain cases to result in UAP phenomenon that correlate with what those individuals either predicted or were describing. But we want to collect more data, right? This is why you want to have as controlled field experiments as possible. And then to cross correlate those two different techniques, both the machine calling as well as the human factors component and to see, is there a piece where one amplifies the other, where one can be used as a test of the other one's effectiveness. And so that's where we are now, is in collecting the data. But I think we have enough to go from, this isn't purely anecdotal, right? We're starting to collect real field data, real results. But it's hard at this point to say you're going to publish a paper on that, right? You can have initial promising results in the lab, but that still means you're a long way from publishing that paper in the journal.
This is music to my ears, because this is going to show our audience what is necessary in order to prove that something is genuinely anomalous and explainable as potential non-human intelligence. I get on a weekly basis now hundreds, possibly thousands of videos sent to me by people from all over the world. And I don't know what to do with them, because frankly, how do you verify something like that? What do you need?
Ross, I think this is an important distinction to make. Like to make the distance between the rungs on this ladder we're trying to ascend closer together, the first step is not knowing what it is. It's a very powerful thing for us to be able to say something is truly anomalous, because what that means is that we've gathered a very strong and qualified group of people and processes and thrown it all at something we're observing and not been able to define it. So the negative there is very powerful, because we should be able to produce positives and define pretty much anything at our sky at this point with this group of people and processes and equipment. And so truly proving too quickly, these acronyms like UFO quickly meant, like anytime it was used in the vernacular, alien origin. We switched that up, and now we got UAP, and that's already evolved pretty much, I think, in people's minds as being alien in origin, and it's not. So to prove that something is truly an unidentified anomalous phenomenon is a great step, because it's not a blanket statement you throw out at everything. We actually are going through there's a process to be able to say, wow, we threw all this at this phenomenon and we can't define what it is. That's pretty exciting and interesting alone.
No, it's fantastic. I'm actually really excited for what you guys are doing. So you're actually at level 3 of preparedness, and now moving to level 4, which is independent verification on the electromechanical signaling, which I'm afraid I will always call the dog whistle. In your document, you say, quote, level 3 means there are now one or more pieces of recorded data, videos, sensor readings that show something truly anomalous, meaning preliminary checks haven't identified it yet as a known object. So can you explain to me any of the detail of what it is that you've picked up or detected as a result of using your electromechanical signaling, the dog whistle?
Maybe I'll take this moment to differentiate something here that I thought of while Matt was speaking. When we talk about the jellyfish, this is not the jellyfish that you have seen on TV or online over the last year, which kind of looks like a flying house plant. This looks more like the aquatic creature. It's like purple, maroon, metallic, with a mushroom head that contracts and extends and retracts its tentacles. It looks like the aquatic creature. So again, without spoiling episode 2 and allowing my colleague to go through these classes appropriately and thoroughly, I'll just say that when we get something on radar, I mean, we're looking to be able to describe it and write it off as something explainable to begin with. So you're looking at like what Lou talks about, the 5 observables. Certainly that's in play. Anything that might look like a balloon, balloons tend to be the scapegoat when you don't have any other bucket to put it in. We all like to use the balloon bucket. And admittedly, a lot of this stuff looks like a balloon, like you could take a Mylar balloon, and we've actually played with that in the field. We launch our own balloons to see if we can deep fake our own data by launching balloons and seeing if we could manufacture something that looks like the anomalous stuff we're seeing. And balloons get ruled out pretty quickly when you take into account wind, because balloons are going to move pretty close to the vector or the direction of travel of the wind and pretty much at the velocity of the wind. So as soon as you start moving perpendicular to the wind or at any angle not directly downwind at velocities different than the ambient wind velocity, balloons get ruled out pretty quickly, despite how much you want to believe that it's a balloon. Because there are classes that look like it could be a balloon until it starts morphing and changing. Like balloons aren't going to change the way they look. And their radar signature also is something that's pretty distinctive. Now, I'm not one of our radar operators. I'm not an analyst for radar, but I'm in our tactical operations center when we're looking at this stuff. And I can tell you that the last thing any of us want is to look foolish by putting something out to the public and saying we think it's anomalous, and then having it easily explained away by all the armchair quarterbacks watching the internet around the world.
So I'm clear on this, Jake. In the episode 2 video, we are going to see the jellyfish.
Oh yeah. Yep. You're going to see it on video. You're going to see images of it. You're going to see a couple of them.
And these have come as a result, you believe, there's a correlation between the electromechanical signaling, the dog whistle,
yes,
causing these objects to arrive. Are you in a position yet to be able to say that the electromechanical signaling is probably responsible for attracting those objects?
Well, you know, everyone's heard the phrase correlation is not causation. But again, like anecdotal evidence is not worthless, correlation is not worthless. There is a process to where correlation can begin to evolve into data and into evidence and into so on. It goes up the chain. So correlation is an important thing. And you start running into probabilities. When correlation is so high and so repeatable, you run out of lack of other explanations. You know, our scientists could do a better job explaining how correlation is actually integrated into meaningful information. But yes, there is a very strong correlation that's repeatable and predictable when we use our dog whistle system, and these things show up.
Yeah. So the one way to, you know, construct what you would try to get as close to a scientific test, and we have done this, although the more trials you do, the more you're going to get confidence, is have a control, right? So the dog whistle is a certain very specific characteristic type of signal that you put out there, and then you wait to see if you're going to see a characteristic set of observed UAP phenomenon appear or not. And then you do everything else, ideally as constant as possible. You do a sort of random noise signal, nothing that you know is associated with attracting UAP, and you see, right, with every other condition the same, do UAP appear or not? And the apparent observations we've had, again, with a certain amount of data collected, is that when you flip the dog whistle on, the UAP appear. If you just flip on a noise control signal, they do not. Now,
and how often is that the case? So is it 100% of the time that when you sound the dog whistle, the electromechanical signaling, do the objects come all the time?
Okay, I'm going to be very bold right here, and I'm going to tell you that 100% of the time when we run our operation with the dog whistle, we get results in broad daylight that is visible from multiple observation posts. And another thing to run a control with correlation is the things that we are seeing are so anomalous. Not only are they not showing up when you run some form of technological placebo, let's say, show me anywhere else that anyone has ever seen in any of these things. Like they don't, you would, if they were not responding to the dog whistle, we would see videos of this jellyfish that you're going to see through cell phone footages out of airliners and other people observing them. I've never seen this outside of, well, let's just say this doesn't exist in the public domain. The only one that does is the Tic Tac, and we all know how exciting and how respectable the Tic Tac accounts are. Those are not to be dismissed as random events.
And how close have your sensors or eyeballs got to these objects? How close have they got to Skywatcher's
They've
detection?
gotten to where we can see them with the naked eye. Yeah.
Is that hundreds of meters, kilometers? What are we talking about?
Less than a half a mile, less 4,000 feet AGL and below.
In broad daylight?
Broad daylight, yeah.
So these are obviously very dramatic images, I suspect.
Well, you know, these things are very hard to image, and even with our expensive equipment, it's not the most spectacular image. It's not going to be like what you would see in Hollywood. AI is going to do a much better job of putting together something like this. They, yeah, and in our episode, we show you the raw data, not zoomed in, and then we'll show you some zoomed in stuff. But it's certainly, again, some of what is considered data. It's funny. There's a bit of a dichotomy because things that are the most respectable from a data standpoint aren't always the most spectacular from like an entertainment standpoint. Some of the things that are probably spectacular that people would like to see, you know, really don't exist in this realm. Real data at times can be less sensational than arbitrary data, I guess.
So, Matt, you've come into this from the outside. I mean, previously, like me, you've known nothing about what Skywatcher's up to. Has it been a revelation for you to see the degree of achievement, gain that they've actually got in their files at the moment?
You know, it was definitely a learning curve, right? To go from, I'd say, the analytical professional observer of this phenomenon and the different kind of political implications, the national security implications that I've been, you know, looking at. But to see it kind of be like a practical activity that a relatively small organization can decide to just go do. That has been the most surprising thing to me. Like, I've already become convinced of the reality of the phenomenon, but the fact that you can have a relatively small group of people with the motivation and the capability to just do it, right? To just get the team together, to get the resources and the capabilities, the equipment and the effort and the public spiritedness to do this in the open. That's the thing that's most surprising to me, right? Because I think a lot of these activities, maybe Jake, have been happening, right? These techniques are not new to Skywatcher. These techniques are known, I think, to other people involved in the legacy programs. We are just doing this in a very different way, in a way that is hopefully going to bring this into the public conversation in a rigorous and transparent manner. That has been the part that I was not prepared for. I was not sort of expecting, right, as a possibility, right, that could help build kind of a bridge to disclosure from the private sector, right, where everyone's looking for the government to declassify things, to convene special task forces, to hold people to account. And I think there's a lot of that activity that needs to happen, right? But ultimately, you know, there's a different game you can play, right? Which is the skies aren't classified. This phenomenon and these techniques aren't classified. You just need to get the right people in the right places, doing the right things for the right reasons. And I think you can have a very significant impact. And maybe even help the government kind of get out of the corner that it's stuck in.
So why is there this semantic change? Why have you moved away from the word psionic, and why are you moving away from the word dog whistle?
I mean, I'm not sure. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know that we're moving away from it. I like the word psionic, and I hope it's not short-lived. And I think we'll, just as creatures, as humans, we'll gravitate back to these kindergarten type terms. But we also, because the phrasing is going to help us identify what it is. When we look at neural meditation, well, that has a very specific meaning, and it categorizes better where we are directing our experiments and our efforts. Psionics is like, it's a sexy rock and roll term for what it is, which is great to have in the public vernacular. But when we are trying to really pin down what it is, we need to assign, I think, more appropriate names that describe the direction of our research.
Yeah, and the way I think everyone has a slightly different take on this on the team, which is good, right? Some are very are the scientists, and scientists are very precise with their verbiage, right? And they're thinking about communicating to like a peer audience, right? Which is when you're describing say a novel phenomenon, you want to use the most kind of bland descriptive term possible so that it connects with the scientific discipline that you want to communicate with. With the lay audience, right? Neuromeditative does not roll off the tongue. It's maybe not the most sort of salient jargon to use in sort of a larger conversation. The other key point I think we have on the neuromeditative side, which is almost as important and sort of, you know, lurks underneath the radar as the UAP side, which is, you know, that is a phenomenon that we also seek to rigorously assess, right? We're using it as a tool, but we're also, you know, designing field experiments around it to understand, you know, under what conditions does it work? how does it work? So we have scientists as part of the team collecting rigorous data on these individuals. Like we're going to be collecting a lot of physiological data points on these individuals as they conduct these activities, because that in itself is almost a equally as important phenomenon to prove is real and to understand the nature of as the UAP phenomenon, right? So we have kind of two somewhat world-shaking propositions that we want to put to the test, right? One is, are anomalous phenomenon real in the sky, right? Highly anomalous, exotic objects or crafts or entities with a very non-terrestrial or prosaic morphologies, and are there capacities of human beings that have not been fully appreciated that can be relevant to understanding those UAP phenomena? Like those are two equally sort of groundbreaking questions. We're trying to collect data on them at the same time, right? So no small task, right? But you have a very high bar you're trying to clear.
So you've talked about how the electromechanical signaling has had a 100% success rate in terms of apparently manifesting the phenomenon. What are you seeing with the what's this term again? The
neuromeditative.
You can call it psionics.
It just doesn't roll off the tongue like
psionics.
Neuromeditative interaction. What are you seeing with neuromeditative interaction?
So I'll let Jake maybe follow up on that, but I'd say that there we rate it as one level below in terms of the dog whistle, in terms of the amount of comparable data we've been able to collect in the field. As you can imagine, a human being is not like a machine you just flip a switch on, right? Like everyone has their own particular way of going about this, sort of meditative protocols. Everyone has their own physiological states as they go throughout their operational activities. I'm sure Jake can speak to the first two. But it just in general, right? Your standards of evidence and your test protocols are going to be very different for a machine-based phenomenon you can just easily control. You can literally check the frequencies, you can do everything, and it's 100% the same every single time. Whereas a human being, the same person the next day, right, is not just going to be the same person, in terms of their wakefulness or whatever is going on in their environment. And so this just takes a lot harder to kind of generate the same degree of kind of controlled, consistent field experiments. But given that proviso, I'll sort of kind of give the TLDR on where we are now.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's more than just that, because what we're finding again is not all 9 classes we don't know what they are or where they're coming from. Like there's probably 3 things going on, right? Or we call them buckets. Like there's probably a blue bucket, which is like advanced tech that's the good guys. Then there might be a red bucket. It might be Chinese or other. And then there's this other bucket, which we don't know where that stuff comes from. And we talk about this at length in episode 2. But on the psionic side of things, they seem to be, this is where the positive and the negative information is valuable, because the psionics sometimes on the detection side will get nothing. We might have the dog whistle have something show up and it's like dead to them. It's like it's an inanimate object to them, where other classes induce a strong psionic response or reported anecdotal experience for the psionics. And that's more class-based. So I can tell you more like the class 9, the egg, seems to have a stronger correlation with our neuromeditative process than say the class 1, the Tic Tac. I won't tell you which class it is.
So you are seeing our friend the egg. You have seen the egg on the range?
So the first 2, how we're going through this process, episode 3 that you'll see, we have seen in Skywatcher episode 1 was a complete, we didn't use the dog whistle in episode 1. So the egg that you saw in episode 1 was a psionically elicited, or it was based on that man calling protocol. Out on the range, during episode 2, which you're going to see on April 7th, that was all dog whistle. The psionics were there operating at night, but they were mostly used on the measurement side to see if what the dog whistle gets to show up, which is a lot of different classes. What were the psionics sensing from that? Could they predict the arrival? Was there something that changed for them? Because they are isolated from the operation where the dog whistle is being run. And so there's a bit of a control there. So we're trying to keep logs and record what the psionic team is experiencing in a pure environment, like in a vacuum, if you will, and see if we can correlate the timing. The psionic team was able to predict some of the things we experienced in episode 2 that you'll see, but we aren't really testing for that. Now, in episode 3 is going to be more focused on the man or the neural meditative summoning processes.
So can I be clear about this? When the psionics have been in operation recently, when you're using the electromechanical signaling, you keep them separate, almost like a control.
Yeah.
When they say, I appreciate that you're saying that they haven't detected all of the classes of object, but when they say they do detect an object, does that correlate with what you're detecting with your sensors?
Timing wise, yes. Like they may say something like, that something is going to show up at a certain time and there is going to be more than one. And this is some of the behavior that we think is going to take place when these two different classes show up. And they've been able to...
This is precognitive, is it? They're basically saying it's going to happen.
Right. And so with the whole psionics thing, it is a frontier on every level. Like there isn't a library or a reference of study here. Like no one has studied this in academia or otherwise, or those that have kept it very private. So man, it's a lot of fun, but we're starting from scratch, and it's such a broad broad subject matter that finding a starting point is a challenge. So right now, there's a lot of throwing spaghetti on the wall to see what sticks, especially with the psionic or neural meditative side of the house.
It's also one that has, I would say, very different kind of moral and ethical guardrails around it, right? In terms of how we think about the human beings, right, that are part of the team, what they're engaging in, what the nature of their intentions are, what the nature of the team's intentions are. This is an experimental activity, but it's guided by like a very strong intentionality, right? That I think fundamentally is in good faith and is in the interest of sort of open discovery and collaboration. I think, this is the frontier, and, there is inherent unknowns associated with engaging in exploratory research. But I think this is the part of the activity I think is the most, I think, fraught in terms of people's assessment of this, right? People have lots of different interpretations of these types of activities, right? From the religious to the occult to, pure psychic kind of, neurophysiological research, right? And I think it's very important to kind of understand there's a wide range of different perspectives people have on these types of activities, from the it's nothing to like, you shouldn't even touch that, right? That's fundamentally demonic, right? and everywhere in between. And we don't take a view on any of that. We don't dismiss any of that, but we take a strong view that all of these activities need to be conducted with, high integrity, positive intentions, and good faith and openness, right? And that doesn't necessarily ensure good outcomes. It just ensures at least that you can control what intentions you're bringing to the activity.
Okay, so let's go through a few of the questions that my audience are demanding I find out from Skywatcher. And Jake, I've given you a heads up on this one. I mean, I think the biggest accusation that's leveled at you and Skywatcher is that this is all some CIA intelligence community front, and that what's going on here is Skywatcher is a way of the government slowly and slyly admitting what it's secretly been doing for decades. What's your response to that?
No, that's not the case. I would say it's more to the contrary, that we are getting support from the government and all the places that we would like to get it, which has been refreshing. And although the government is taking interest and is getting involved with us, we are in the driver's seat. They are not the elicitors of the cooperation that we are forming with them. We are. And
so are they with you on the range? Like, are you getting, for example, I mean, it would be my hope, for example, that ARROW, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, might be taking an interest from the Pentagon's UAP investigation team. Are they involved?
You know, the Office of ARROW is, to me, it's one of the most exciting offices the Defense Department has ever stood up. And in the spirit of that office, I'm really excited about it. And I really do hope that we can have a more functional and opening relationship with them. We are in communication with them. They have been on the range in the past with us, but they aren't the only ones that have an interest in this. There's a number of departments across government. And under the new administration, we've got a lot of there's been a lot of positive interactions and a lot of plans for the future. And you'll learn more about that quickly. What we're doing, you have to forgive me, but we really want to allow anyone on the government side their own opportunity to discuss their involvement with this project on their own watch. And I would expect to hear more about that in the future.
But can I explore this with you, Jake? I'm increasingly coming to the view that it's completely wrong for us to perceive the whole government, the defense and intelligence community, as one amorphous blob that is antagonistically opposed to any kind of disclosure on the phenomenon.
Yeah,
there are people in defense and intelligence who want this story told.
Yeah.
And I get the impression they see Skywatcher as a vehicle to achieve that.
Yeah, I hope we're that. I hope we allow certain parts of the government to a path forward to get them out of the corners that they've painted themselves in. And again, there is no real they. I mean, anyone that's not completely naive can tell, if you haven't been living in a cave the last 5 years, that the government is not this big cohesive cooperative body, and even all the offices within. It's a group of individuals just like us, and individuals have their own human instincts and motivations, and their tenure of variety of lengths. And you end up with you don't end up with a unified message or intent or policy in that regard. So I'll tell you, in whole, generally speaking, we're really encouraged. The men in black have not showed up. I've never seen them out there. No one's telling us stop doing what you're doing. We've been very open and transparent, made multiple trips on a regular basis to DC, meeting with Congress and a number of other departments, and have been very forthcoming with what we're doing, what our success has been, and what our intentions are. And we're getting nothing but support. No one's telling us stop, and no one's showing up trying to shut us down.
So that's the next question, of course, is what do you do if the men in black do turn up and say, look, for national security reasons, we're not going to let you continue doing this?
Well, if that happens, you all will know about it because the cameras will be rolling, and we're certainly going to share that. I don't expect that to happen, but if it does happen, it's not going to happen in secret. And you got my word on that.
So one of the things that I think it's important to give you the opportunity to clarify this, in your document that you've got, the framework document that you're releasing in a few days, you say that due to national security considerations, we must ensure that we're not inadvertently disclosing any information that could compromise classified US government capabilities or sensor technologies. Now, I know there's a bit of ambiguity in that statement. You're not saying there that you're going to collaborate with the government to censor what you discover, but you are saying that if you inadvertently, for example, detect, say, let's say a new type of fighter or some new craft that the United States is working on, you would respect the national security constraints on that. Is that correct?
Matt?
Yes. Yeah, that's what it says. Yeah. So we are not looking for prior restraint from the government to go through our data sets and say this is permissible. But if it's a platform that some members of the team are aware of already, that is U.S. government platform, it's irresponsible for us to just release information that we think would harm national security without furthering any public interest objectives. So we have that.
You guys are patriots. You're not about to compromise something that gives America an advantage.
Yeah, we're interested in scientific discovery of anomalous phenomena, right? We're not looking to publish images for some Aviation Weekly cover page on some next generation US government platform.
But Jake, you and I both know that behind all of this is the reality that there's a legacy program. And whatever it's been doing with the technology it's been recovering, it's obviously been trying to reverse engineer it. And there is, I suspect, a probability, if not a likelihood, that the United States, even though the Pentagon officially denies all of this, there is a probability or a likelihood that the United States is actually working with this technology. What if there is craft that are being operated by the United States? I mean, it's a hypothetical, I appreciate, which are retrieved non-human craft. I know that's been speculated about quite openly, that we may have learned the ability to perhaps psionically operate or neuromeditatively operate these craft. Do you censor that? Do you hide that from the public if that's what's discovered?
I think you have to be careful what you wish for. I think that when you are altruistically patriotic and altruistically concerned for national security, even in a situation where there's a lack of guidance on how we should proceed with our data, that burden still falls on us. None of us on our team are going to go, well, they didn't tell us we can't show this, so we're going to cast it out there. So we are taking every precaution we can. If we see something that looks like the F-48, we've just been briefed on the F-47, we're going to push hard, and there's no good reason. And honestly, there's way more interesting things going on than something like that. So that's again why a true patriot, someone who's truly concerned with national security, is not going to be irresponsible, even in the lack of leadership and oversight.
The other thing that people have jumped on is, I think in one of your original videos, there was an image, a cutaway of a machine gun. I think a 50 caliber machine gun. What's it for?
The machine gun. First of all, so it's for self-defense. We are very safety and defense oriented, and safety and self-defense is paramount, and it's the platform that allows everybody to do their job stress-free.
So again, within the constraints of what you're allowed to tell me, would you ever use any kind of offensive weaponry, be it conventional, say a machine gun or a rocket launcher, or a high pulse microwave weapon to down a non-human craft?
No, and that's highly illegal. Everything we do is done in accordance with our FAA and FCC operational, what's called op specs, and we don't do anything illegal out there.
But the self-defense aspect, I guess that's two-pronged. One of the things you might be worried about is a foreign adversary nation taking a very close interest in the work that you're doing, and that's why obviously you're operating to a degree covertly. But the other thing I can anticipate that you might be concerned about is that if these are non-human craft, they might not be very happy with being invited or summoned or whatever it is that happens when you use the electromechanical signaling or the neuromeditative interaction. Is those two scenarios what you're thinking of with defensive weaponry?
No, I can't imagine that the latter. I mean, first of all, to even get to that conversation, we're accepting the fact that NHI exists and that aliens exist. So most of the people that are putting this argument, I don't think it's a genuine argument or slander of us. First of all, it's speculation as to why anyone that has a weapon out there is an experienced, qualified operator and is responsible and understands rules of engagement. That's not why we're here. And I would have to imagine that if someone was to do that, it'd be like taking a knife to a gunfight. You're going to lose. I can't imagine anything we have would compete with something on that level. And the last thing we want to do is act aggressively. As Matt talked about, intention is huge for us. And it's not just for the neuromeditators or the psionic assets. Everyone on the team and everyone that is on the team has been selected for not only their skills that they're contributing, but their intent and their spiritual orientation. Our primary barrier for entry is that intent for all members on the team. I don't care if you're cleaning the Skywatcher toilet or you're running the dog whistle, you have to be pure of heart. We actually have a written oath. It's a beautiful oath, and maybe we'll publish it, but it's a 500-word oath that talks about the purity of our intentions. And we actually set intentions every day before operations and at the end of operations. And it's quite a beautiful thing, because that combined intention, let's just remove the fact that we are playing with something that borderlines on metaphysical. If you were doing any job, if you showed up to a construction site with a bunch of contractors and you were going to build a house, I think it would be a pretty effective thing for synergy and teamwork to combine your effort and to do something like a prayer that orients everyone and connects everyone together. It's very functional for from a work ethic standpoint, and it's the cornerstone of our operations.
The people who I know who are psionic or purport to have psionic abilities, neuro-meditative interaction abilities, they tell me that you're right, that intention, indeed an expression of love, as corny as that sounds, is actually incredibly important, because the phenomenon can reflect back at you what you are. And I know from people who've been to the Skinwalker Ranch, which is another site in Utah where there is alleged anomalous phenomena. The people who have been in combat or in near-death situations, they often have quite horrific experiences that the phenomenon seems to reflect back at them something about their own life experience. Is that something you're seeing on the range?
Seeing, is yet to be determined. We certainly feel that way. Again, it's something why we've established this framework. It's something that we would love to prove, because how amazing would that be if we could prove scientifically and get to level 6, where we have full disclosure and integration of this particular hypothesis right here, that intention matters. Like, talk about now, do you want the Defense Department? This is a good example of why we shouldn't burden them with figuring this out for us. Like, that's huge. And that's a really exciting thing.
So, Matt, you talk in the document, in the framework document, about the importance of getting independent review, independent verification. Are you able to tell me who you're planning on using? What scientific body would you use to get independent verification?
Well, we haven't selected like a single group or sort of knighted a particular partner organization. I think there's lots of folks out there that we would provide an invitation to assess different parts of our analysis depending on their expertise, right? There's gonna be a lot of complicated data that we're collecting, right? That is quite technical in terms of its radar, EOIR, and collating and integrating that type of technical data to the point where you can get an independent sort of peer review assessment of our findings. You're not just going to find those things by, whacking a tree. But we're going to take invitations from folks that are interested. And so folks that want to get involved in potentially, bringing those different skills to bear, will have ways of engaging with us. But we're going to be publishing the papers that we intend to write on sort of public repositories like archives, which sort of where you sort of post sort of pre-publication drafts of papers. And the typical sort of scientific method is, you have interesting results, you write it up in a paper, you publish the paper. It's now, anyone can download it and can sort of produce their own rebuttal or their own critique, right? And then you respond to those critiques, and ultimately, if you feel like you've gotten to the point where you've checked all the different possible objections, you try to get it published. And so we're going to try to pursue like the serious scientific track for the scientific hypotheses that we're looking to test, as well as, but a lot of people aren't going to read, technical papers, right? As well as produce more consumable content that allows people to understand the journey that we're on, try to bring this information out to the public. But we're looking for folks that have specialized skills to assess this type of data. And we haven't picked like a particular group that's going to be the chosen third party, but there are others out there that we might engage.
Jake, when you and I first met, one of the things you told me, and I remember thinking this is just off-planet stuff, it sounded crazy, but you're actually doing it. You talked to me about the idea that we don't need to get government verification of the phenomenon, that good science can prove what you suspect or know to be the case, that there is this phenomenon that can be independently verified. At the heart of what you were telling me, though, was the intention to ultimately invite a craft to land. Are you still planning to do that?
We're certainly open to it. We would love that if that happened. I mean, getting to experience exotic material would be amazing. I think that would be, I think everybody wants that. And yeah, it would be nice to have government involvement. But this is, this isn't just in this realm. There's the private sector and there's the government sector. And we've seen how each of those sectors has handled a variety of goods and services and has produced things. And there's pros and cons to each, whether you're trying to build a bridge or manage a department of administration for some function. And it's the same in this realm. It's unavoidable. Again, we're doing everything, legally. I'll tell you, everyone on our team, before they come and work for us, I kind of make this promise when we're looking to hire people. I go, look, we'd love to have you. Here's what we're doing. These are the 4 pillars that drive our decision making on what kind of projects we're going to take on. First of all, it needs to be legal, it needs to be safe, it needs to be fun, and it needs to be profitable. Now, that last one, profit. This thing costs money. Like, we are asking a lot, and we respect the people that work for us. We don't expect them to come work for free. This can't be done in part-time. You can't sacrifice your weekly golf round and come join us for that. We take this seriously, and we're fortunate enough to have folks provide us the financing in order to operate on a humble budget and stretch this out as long as we can so we could get to level 6 in our framework. But to have the right balance between government and private, that's why since the very beginning we've talked about a public-private partnership. And that's ultimately where we would like to get with this, because yeah, you could do this without the government to a certain extent, but you can't do it entirely without them. And why would we want to? Like, the government needs to be in place, and I'd rather just improve upon the relationship rather than do without it.
There's a lot of things that you've said today that I think a lot of our audience are going to find absolutely exciting and mind-blowing. But I think the one thing that's in your report, in the framework document, that really leapt out at me is that you make a very bold claim that by following the framework's 6 levels, Skywatcher will either validate or definitively rule out these techniques, that is, electromechanical signaling or neuromeditative interaction, reaching a conclusive determination by the end of 2025. What the implications of that are, correct me if I'm wrong, you will, by the end of this year, you predict, know whether it is possible to electromechanically or neuromeditatively invite a non-human intelligence to engage with humanity.
Yeah, I would say, Matt, I'll do a quick answer and you can take over. But I would say, based on our progress so far and the framework we've set out, I think, and how much progress we've made so far, I think greater things have been done in a less amount of time. So it seems like a very practical goal, and we're not afraid to set that target and go for it. I think goal orientation is important.
Yeah, it sounds a bit absurd, I think, only because nobody's tried it, right? So the good thing is this is sort of open field running for this team, and the first few runs they've got pretty far down the field. And so yeah, I think we're not letting our foot off the gas. Like, we want to continue to refine, expand, improve the operations, the rigor of the experiments. The first 2 were essentially learning trials, right? I think now we're hitting our stride, and I think we're already going to see quite dramatic shifts in the level of information we're able to collect. And so I think it's not an unreasonable extrapolation to also set a target downrange for us to aim at, right? Like, this shouldn't be like a indefinite activity, like that goes on for year after year after year, and we keep moving the goalposts, right? And it becomes this kind of, thing, right? And we want to make a clear statement. We want to achieve a certain level of confidence. We want to achieve a certain level of high confidence in the data that we're gathering, and we want to share that with the public as soon as possible to resolve these questions as quickly as possible, right? We have no interest in just having this be an indefinite thing. Like, we want to get to a conclusion. We want to get to a resolution on at least some of these questions, right? I think a lot of these questions that are going to then be opened up are going to take a lot longer to resolve, but I think that's where we want to shift the conversation as quickly as possible.
I truly believe, Ross, real quick, I truly believe that regardless of where we are at the end of 2025, when discovery comes and when a level 6 disclosure happens, which I believe wholeheartedly it will, we will look back on our effort in 2025 as Skywatcher, and it will be the starting point, and it should be revered as the launch point for how we got to level 6 and how others will have gotten there if they beat us to it.
Gentlemen, I want to put this in its context. If you pull this off, this is a scientific exploration achievement that I think overshadows humanity's greatest ever achievements. I mean, this would be one of the defining moments in human history, wouldn't it?
That's a heavy thing to take to heart, but I agree with you. But I just would say that part of why I think we are able to make the progress we have and are going to make is being done on the backs and shoulders of people that have created technology and educational references for us to even do this type of experimentation to begin with. Like, even just the camera technology, radar technology, all the scientists that are coming to help us out are bringing with them things that weren't available even 5-10 years ago. So for us to take credit for that, we're more like my good friend Don Paul says, we're like the reverse prism, if you will, that takes refractive light or takes a light beam and turns it into a rainbow. We're doing the opposite. We're taking all the colors of the rainbow, concentrating them and turning them into a concentrated beam of light. And I think that's kind of, if we get there, we were just the group that came along and was able to take all of these resources and direct them and apply them to this subject and this question and these hypotheses in order to reach that conclusion.
Yeah, Matt, you obviously have a sense of history here. I mean, I'm interested in getting your personal emotional reaction to what you're involved in. I mean, if you pull this off, this is history, isn't it?
I mean, yes, in a certain sense. I also think there's a certain matter of inevitability associated with this, right? Like, I think there are an increasingly, large number of individuals in and out of the government that are aware of the reality of this phenomenon, right? So it's as if there was a secret group of scientists that had already made a discovery by sending, submersibles down to the Marianas Trench and had discovered a bunch of exotic, jellyfish living, 30,000 feet down, right? And they had written secret reports to each other. They had collected samples. And so it was a fact for those individuals, right? And then, James Cameron comes along and builds a submersible and brings a film crew and goes down to the depths and takes pictures, maybe even collects some samples and brings it back for the rest of the scientific community. You would herald that as a massive discovery, but in a certain sense, it was already known, right, to be true, right? It's just what matters, though, for the rest of our society is not like discovery is a social process, right? Discovery requires people accepting that thing is true, right? And I run through this hypothetical, is say that we do retrieve exotic materials, right? Say we do get, an intact craft of some kind or some exotic biologic or whatever it is. That doesn't immediately just flip everyone's opinion overnight, right? You still have to do science. You still have to prove, is this thing, which looks really weird or looks apparently highly anomalous and comes in all these different video streams and radar, and then we've got it up close. Well, you're still going to have to answer well, that's just CGI. That's just styrofoam. That's just a bunch of, like glop that they threw down onto the desert floor, right? You're gonna have to bring in scientists. You're gonna have to bring individuals to study the material. You're gonna have to have the most advanced equipment, prove the material isn't of known means of human manufacture or isn't associated with the phylogenetic tree of other biological creatures. So just because you get material doesn't mean science ends. Usually that's actually when the most important science starts. And the process of, quote, like disclosure, that social integration is going to be a process. And I think this is where it won't be like the light switch that flips on. I think there will be a bunch of, what's that moments. But I think the process of recognition of the significance of this will take a lot of time to settle in. But I think the most important part of it, though, is that there's a lot of information, at least from my perspective, that exists on this subject. So it's a process both of discovery, but that the ideally is that the discovery catalyzes disclosure, right? And that builds a bridge between the public and the private sectors to get more of the sort of larger context for this subject into the public domain. And that can't come from us, right? That can't come all from us. Like, we have our specific mission is to collect this data, to bring it to the public, and to provide, a clear accounting and a storyline as we go about this process. But it doesn't mean we're going to answer everything, right? We don't have the final sort of word here, right? We're not going to be bringing the truth down from the mantle or from the mountaintops, right?
Well,
Like,
and that's built
Yeah.
into our framework. That's already
Yes.
built into our discovery framework. Like,
Exactly.
level 4 is what an independent verification and peer review. That's already there, and that starts over again when we get something to the ground. We go back through that process.
And interpretation of science is still a very fraught matter, right? Like, there's usually very little in the way of consensus on lots of things in the scientific community, even on things that are proven to be real phenomenon, right? It takes a lot of work to understand, well, what is it, right? What's its nature, right? How does it work? Where does it come from? These are ultimately the questions people want answers to. And that's going to be a much longer journey of analysis and partnership. That's going to require a lot of resources and a lot of capabilities that span far beyond Skywatcher, but it's the ambition we want to set, right? We want to start having that conversation, and by treating this with rigor and professionalism, bring in experts from across these different disciplines, right? That now have to perk up and bring their attention and their skills to the subject. And I think that is really, the most significant historical inflection for me will be the result of these efforts, is by providing that locus point where you provide, this is actually a real phenomenon here. We've got the data, now come and study it. Right. And now there's an anchor point, there's a locus around which other communities of practice and other expertise can flow in. And that can then hopefully catalyze something quite transformative.
Jake, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about something that Dr. Professor Gary Nolan said a couple of days ago. He did an interview and he said that Skywatcher observed unexplained things that moved in anomalous ways during the New Jersey drone wave.
Yeah.
When you have drones coming in from the ocean, he said, and then returning to the ocean, that's not hobbyist drones. Did you get the impression that some of what you saw when you were observing over Picatinny Arsenal during the December period for Skywatcher, did you get the impression that what you were seeing was anomalous at times?
Yeah, it certainly met like those first 2 levels of framework. For us, we were in New Jersey for a very short amount of time, about a week. On the first two or 3 days, we got a lot of information, but the weather came in and it really inhibited us to move to the higher levels. It was a pretty chaotic situation, but I can tell you that what we did see when out there was not all explained or explainable by what we're hearing. I worked very closely with the FAA during that time. The FAA wasn't, how do I say this? They weren't aware of and weren't in communication and control with the craft that were flying there. And also not all the things that it's a very busy airspace out there. So yes, most of what you see flying in the air around that area is airplanes and maybe some other drones, but that's not what the focus is. There is a large category of things that were flying in the air, I'll just say illegally, and didn't look like your typical craft, and they were coming from a variety of directions. These are all things people have heard before already, but either turning their lights on and off or disappearing and appearing, and also coming from a variety of directions, which included out over the ocean, which is one of the observation posts that we held when we were out there.
So basically, the official word still from the White House is that these drones over New Jersey, supposed drones, were FAA authorized drones. On the basis of what you're saying there, these objects were anomalous and they were not known by the FAA.
Yeah, I would say that statement is true, but it doesn't account for all the things that were in the air over New Jersey, or for that matter, any of the other geographical locations where we're having similar incursions.
It does lend to the suspicion, and I'm not trying to draw you into the controversy here, but it
Please
does
don't.
lend to this. No, but it does lend to the. I mean, there's an obvious contradiction at the moment between what the White House has said that the objects over New Jersey are FAA authorized drones, and the fact that people are still reporting these objects. And it just struck me that it's something that Skywatcher could play a really important role in helping resolve. Is that something that Skywatcher would like to get involved in? Is figuring out the mystery of what these anomalous objects are that apparently still are showing themselves over parts of the East Coast in particular?
Well, I would say there's only so much time in the day, Ross. Like we all have to get our sleep and brush our teeth and go to the mailbox. I don't know with our team right now that we even have the bandwidth or time to do that. But ultimately, if there was an organized interest in our participation in helping to look into that issue, of course, we would like the opportunity. But right now, we're pretty busy.
I mean, in general, right? So we're focused on scientific discovery. We're setting up controlled field experiments. The equipment, though, that we're using and the skills and expertise of the team is like 100% transferable to normal counter UAS domains, which is exactly why they were deployed. And so they have the capabilities, the discernment, the analytical expertise to support those types of activities. And obviously, like, air domain awareness is one of these overlapping terms that is used to put both traditional traditional sort of UAS unidentified, unmanned aerial systems as well as UAP together, right? And I think those are very important subjects, but sometimes they get conflated. But the good thing is we have like the technical capabilities and the skills to use in many different contexts. But right now, like our mission is to collect the data on UAP, right? If there was another incident that required these capabilities, like we could deploy them, but I think it would probably be at this point kind of at the cost of the research objectives we have for now.
Well, gentlemen, Jake Barber and Matthew Pines, I take my hat off to you if you really do have video of these objects across 9 categories of object, including the jellyfish. I, for one, will be stuck to my TV screen waiting for that moment to see what you've been able to record. And I think everybody would wish you the very best in good intentions in achieving what you're setting out to achieve. What you're potentially setting out to achieve is historic. And thank you to both of you for appearing on Reality Check.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ross.
Yes, thanks, Rox. And please engage everyone that follows our work. Looking forward to hearing everyone's feedback.
Actually, that's one thing I was going to ask you about. You actually say in the document that you're wanting people with either expertise in psi abilities or knowledge of systems or techniques that might be pertinent to your investigations. You're inviting people to come forward, aren't you?
Yes, I think we'll have more structured sort of calls for expertise and involvement coming out in the future. But certainly if folks want to reply to our various socials, and then we'll be doing more kind of structured rollout of our website and other things. So there'll be more ways to sort of get engaged and contact Skywatcher in the near future, as well as as we are looking for engagement on third-party review of our analysis. That will come when that analysis is ready.
I would just say, like, we have no shortage there right now. I mean, we have we're very fortunate to have the quality and quantity of individuals and professionals working. I mean, today we're out there on the range right now, and it's great. So, but we want, especially for that independent review, we want to expose this to more and more people. But right now, like, just putting everyone on task, everyone's very enthusiastic. They all want to get involved. And we have a number of folks right now that are out there in the field. We're just looking to broaden that and expose that to more people for that third-party verification and involvement.
Well, I hope that wasn't a gunshot in the background there.
I'll quote Reagan and I'll say, "You missed me."
Gentlemen, thank you so much again. And I wish you the very, very best of luck, and looking forward to your next video.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Ross.
Next time.
Hello. So the myth has long been that in order to stay young and beautiful looking, we need special wrinkle creams. According to Dr. John Lakey, the world-renowned Beverly Hills beauty expert, most of those wrinkle fixes on the market are nothing more than glorified moisturizers. So recently, Dr. Lakey has focused his attention away from mainstream cosmetic practice to pursue a revolutionary anti-aging technology breakthrough, one that some experts say could empty the wallets of the cosmetics industry. His personal clients have dubbed his new do-it-yourself technique the age rewinder method, because it can take years or even decades off your appearance in under 2 minutes. I could do with some of this stuff. Dr. Lakey has released a step-by-step video to the public, free and uninterrupted, where he outlines exactly how to use this simple solution from home. The video's racked up over 2.3 million views and counting. So far, thousands of women, what about the men, are reporting they look decades younger. So you can find out more about this yourself right now. Go to bhmd1.com/Ross or click on the link in the description box below. That's bhmd1.com/Ross. Now, there is one thing that Dr. Lakey asks from his viewers. If watching this video helps you look and feel younger than you have in years, then please share this video with your friends and loved ones. Together, we have the power to make as many women reclaim a youthful look as possible. Go watch the video at bhmd1.com/Ross right now, or just click on the link in the description box below. G'day and welcome to the Reality Check Q&A, again with Alexandra Bush. G'day, Alex. Let's fire away and try and wade our way through the morass of questions we've got coming in.
Awesome. Our first question is about UFO whistleblower David Grusch. We recently found out he's been hired to be a senior advisor to a representative from Missouri. A person here on Twitter asked, how much will David be able to actually advise this lawmaker? And, what can he really express and share with them?
Well, I can say I've spoken to David a few times about this appointment to Representative Eric Burleson's office, and I think it's a great move, and so does David. It's an opportunity for David to be on the inside the Congress, pushing not just his own representative, but also directing questions and instructing people in other areas. One of the big problems, frankly, is we all think that congressmen are probably just sitting around waiting for the next UAP information. They are pretty busy. And so I think somebody like David, who has the expertise that he's bringing to the job, is really important. There is a question mark about how much he can share because of the, interestingly enough, not so much the security classifications for David, because whilst he's still obviously waiting, I think, for the renewal of his security clearance, as I understand it, the issue is more, are the members of the Oversight Committee, of which Eric Burleson is one, cleared to hear all that David would be cleared to provide? And that's a big issue. I mean, the way that this has been kept secret in the Congress is there are individuals in the Congress, notably members of the Gang of Eight, who are supposedly allowed to be briefed into all secrets, including WUSAPs, waived, unacknowledged special access programs, the biggest secrets of all. And I know for a fact they haven't been. So there's been a clear breach of oversight here. The personal view I have on this is it's great that David's on the inside, and it's great that we have representatives like Eric Burleson who's basically asking questions about the UAP issue. And there are individual members of the UAP caucus who are fired up on this issue. But I really do take the view that this needs to be coming from the White House. This needs to be leadership from the White House. A lot of people, particularly on the Republican side, are waiting to see what the president's going to say on the UAP issue, because conspicuously, President Trump has signed executive orders authorizing or mandating the declassification of JFK, RFK, MLK, Epstein files, but we're still waiting to see any executive order on the UAPs. And I guess the ball is in the president's court on that area. And I suspect a lot of the Congress people who are basically interested in chasing this issue are waiting to see what leadership comes from the White House.
All right, we have a question from Louise on Twitter. She asks, Ross, would you consider doing an Easter special on the Shroud of Turin on Reality Check?
Louise is an Australian friend of mine and a very good one. And she's also a believer in the Catholic Church and everything it does, and in particularly the Shroud of Turin. And we've had long, interesting debates about this. And suffice to say, I'm a bit of a Shroud of Turin skeptic. But look, I guess like a lot of these issues, if there's new evidence, I mean, I am struck by the fact that there was some recent testing done on the Shroud, and it did date back 2,000 years, 2 millennia. I haven't actually directed my mind to it in the kind of detail where I would feel comfortable looking at it. I do know that the Vatican has a miracles department that investigates miracles, and I don't think I've even told Louise this, that when I was working in television in Australia, I was involved in reporting on the investigation by the Vatican of a real miracle. And it was fascinating to see the degree of scientific rigor that the Vatican brought to their analysis of whether or not what happened to an Australian woman who's still alive and who was cured from her cancer was indeed a miracle. And I just don't know what to know about this. It's enough to be involved in investigating the UAPs issue. The idea of religious miracles is something that I've never really applied my mind to. If somebody can help me with evidence, I'm happy to go there.
Edward from YouTube asks, Ross, now that UFOs are becoming more acceptable as a topic, do you think it's time to revisit historical UFO stories that were dismissed as nonsense in their day?
Oh, okay. That's a good question. You know, I've always been interested in the 1896, 1897 UFO waves over the United States, which started in California and slowly there were sightings across the Midwest and eventually even on the East Coast. When I was researching my book In Plain Sight, I was researching American newspaper archives from the 19th century, and I was struck by the fact that there was this plethora of sightings of supposed airships. And when you actually go in and look at the articles that described what people were seeing, it included lights, and it included descriptions that are not that far away from the current UAP flap, the supposed drone flap that's been occurring across the United States in the last few months. The one that the Pentagon and the FAA are all claiming are authorized research drones, and which certain skeptics assert with absolute confidence, the braggarts as they are simply home hobby drones, and that we're all confusing them in a moment of mass hysteria. I must say, I do think there are interesting historical parallels between those kind of sightings. There's the, I think, Aurora, Texas UFO story. And all of these, of course, have been dismissed as hoaxes. But when you actually do what I did, which is to go back and have a look through the newspaper archives of the era, what really struck me was the number of independent articles. These weren't just syndicated articles being sent across the United States. These were individual reporters in individual towns right across the western part of the United States, and then a little bit less as it crept across the east. Something was moving across from west to east, and it was described as airships, 1896, 1897. And it was the fact to me that the hoaxers have claimed that this was just journos in San Francisco making up BS stories and then putting them out on the wires for a bit of fun, and that they got picked up in a kind of a mass hysteria at the time. It doesn't wash with me, because when you actually look at the way these stories were reported, these were individual reporters in individual towns in very remote parts of America, basically reporting the same thing: craft being flown by humanoids who actually on occasion spoke to these people, who actually acknowledged that these were some kind of advanced new craft. And remember, this is before known propelled mechanized flying machines. So it was a very, very weird period in American history, and there was never any explanation for it. My only issue with that story is, how do you investigate it? Unless somebody comes forward with new evidence, all we're really doing is raking over the old stories from the past. And I guess I, for one, am getting a bit bored with those. That's why I'm more excited about what people like Skywatcher are doing, and more excited by the possibility of us being able to attract the phenomenon and perhaps record it scientifically using cameras and other sensor equipment so that we can verify or disprove whatever it is.
Well, speaking of old stories, someone on YouTube wants to know whatever happened to that Las Vegas UFO backyard incident. Seems like it just vanished like many stories before it.
Okay, look, I have a perpetual argument with my good friend and buddy Scott Roeder from Evidence Room. He's a forensic investigator who really got into this case and spent a lot of time investigating it. I strongly commend everybody go to his site, Evidence Room, Scott Roeder, R-O-D-E-R. Scott is very much a believer in the Las Vegas case, and he did come on NewsNation. We did actually do a special with Scott where he was interviewed about his reasons why he felt the whole story was legitimate. He'd interviewed members of the family who were sticking by their story that in their Las Vegas backyard there was a landing of some kind of a craft, and in fact there were certain types of creatures, entities that were seen and in fact videoed in the backyard by members of the family. I never really felt there was enough evidence, and I always felt it was strange the way the family were, at least initially, quite evasive about speaking publicly. I'm told by Scott that they have more recently been interested in speaking and engaging, and that they're not resiling from what they say they saw. But look, NewsNation, again, we broke the story and kept leading it out there, and we did the special. There's not much more we can do unless new information comes forward.
David from Twitter asked, has Ross considered digging into past abductee stories to obtain better insight into UAP, like Kelly Cahill's or other prominent cases?
Wow, I'm glad somebody's picked up in the US on the Kelly Cahill case, because that's one of my favorites. The Kelly Cahill case is a case involving a woman in suburban Melbourne. She's driving her car back from some social event in a fairly remote, slightly rural part of suburban Melbourne late one night. And she pulls over because she sees lights in a field. And there's this whole missing time phenomenon, what she describes as being taken on board a craft. Again, it's kind of recovered memories. And she's very convincing in the interviews that I've seen. There are a lot of interviews with her on film from, I think, 30 or 40 years ago. I actually tried to find Kelly and tried to get her to participate in an interview with me for my book, In Plain Sight, when I was doing my research a few years ago, because I'd heard that there was independent corroboration of Kelly's abduction, that there was a second family that were in another car that saw her walking off into the field and then being taken off by some kind of giant flying saucer. And it's a story that I've been told by multiple people, that there are these secondary witnesses. And that's what I always look for. I'm not really interested in raking over the coals of old stories unless we can find new evidence that helps us take it further. And because this case is now, 40 years old, it would be great to be able to retell it, but with new information. So if anybody out there knows what I'm talking about, the second family in the car that night that saw Kelly being taken, I'd be very, very interested in talking to them. Depressingly, there is, ironically, I'm told, a UFO body in Australia that did the interview with this family. And for some reason, it's never released the findings of that interview. One of the problems in the UFO, UAP research world is kind of jealous enmities mean that people hold on to information and never release it. And I think in the interests of transparency, it's important to get this stuff out there so that it can be assessed and verified or disproved.
We have a viewer from Twitter asking, who and why would Ross subpoena for a task force if he had the power?
Oh, boy. Certainly the principals of Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, Battelle, and Boeing. I have no doubt at all that those companies are in possession or have knowledge of legacy UAP programs. There are certain individuals within what used to be called the Office of Global Access in the CIA, whose names I know, but I'm not really willing to disclose them here because I'm not sure that they're not active intelligence operatives with the CIA, and revealing their names might compromise ongoing intelligence operations. But yes, there are certain key individuals I would like to see subpoenaed. And look, frankly, people like David Grusch and other witnesses, including Jake Barber, have given these names to particular Senate Intelligence and Senate Armed Services committees in the last few years. The big question in my mind is, have the Senate particularly lost interest in UAPs? Have they been bought off by the defence and intelligence establishment because they've gone very, very quiet? I know there is frustration in the Senate Intelligence Committee, particularly, that the members of that committee are going soft on investigating the UAP issue. They have the evidence, and I smell some kind of internal control. I think, sadly, the defence and intelligence lobby is winning the day in the Senate. And thank you to the members of the UAP caucus in the House who are still pushing with this issue. They are, I'm sorry to say, relatively junior members of the Congress, but they still have power, and full marks to Eric Burleson on the Oversight Committee and indeed on the Dogue Committee, who are still pushing. People like him are still pushing for transparency. And frankly, they will be the people who are remembered in history. I suspect the people on the Senate who are essentially, I think, conspiring to sit on this issue and hope that we all forget about it are the people whose names will live in infamy.
Phil has emailed us. He asked, what is your top theory as to why disclosure of NHI has not occurred? There's this notion that people can't handle the truth. What could be so monumental?
Disclosure of NHI actually has occurred in many ways. If you think about it, think about where we've advanced since 2017. The government of the United States has officially admitted that there is a phenomenon of unidentified anomalous phenomena, intelligently controlled objects moving in ways that appear to be operating under intelligent control, that are doing things using the 5 observables as a test that seem to be beyond human technology. Now, that's about as close as you're going to get to any kind of official disclosure at this time of NHI. And it's funny, I just want to say this. I think sometimes we all tend to treat the military, the defence and intelligence establishment, as one kind of amorphous blob of a bunch of stiffs in suits who are all basically saying, no, we're not going to release this evidence. We're never going to tell the truth about what's really going on with NHI. I'm really struck how in the last few months, particularly since Jake Barber's come forward, there's been a real change inside sources of mine from the defence and intelligence establishment. There are people who are saying to me, because I've asked this question repeatedly, is there any good reason why we can't know at least that there is an NHI presence engaging with this planet? And a few people have reached out to me privately, confidentially, and said, there is no good reason, Ross, keep on pushing. And more importantly, a lot of them are extremely sympathetically disposed towards the Skywatcher operation. A lot of people are saying that what's happening in government is there is a paralysis, and particularly in the US Air Force, talking about stiffs in suits. There are good people in the US Air Force, but there are people in command roles who think that you, the public, will freak out if you learn that the United States Air Force is not able to guarantee air dominance over the United States. And these guys who live their lives swearing an oath to protect the United States simply don't want to admit that there is essentially a technology of some kind that is penetrating US airspace, hovering with impunity over US Air Force bases and civilian areas across the United States, and they can't do a thing about it. They've repeatedly failed using high-tech microwave pulse weapons to bring these objects down. And that's what I'm told is very much the substance of what was revealed in a select Armed Services Committee, a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing that took place earlier this week, that essentially the members have been pushing for answers from the Pentagon, especially since there were admissions made that the Pentagon is still mystified by whatever these UAPs are. People should go back and have a look at the significance of what was revealed on CBS 60 Minutes the other week, where General Van Herk and General Mike Kelly, two retired Air Force generals, along with Senator Roger Wicker, basically all admitted they have no bloody idea what these objects are. So the public's being lied to. And I used to think it was because of some sinister conspiracy. I don't anymore. I just think it's people in the US Air Force in particular and the CIA who can't bring themselves to admit that despite the billions, in fact trillions of dollars we spend on national defense, they are not able to protect the continental United States, CONUS, from incursions by unknown craft. That's the real issue that is hindering disclosure. And frankly, the increasing view from a lot of people on the inside that I'm hearing, including people in the legacy program, is there is no good reason for you, the public, not to know about this. And more importantly, they're placing their hopes that an organization like Skywatcher might prove what the government is so desperately unwilling to admit.
A viewer sent us an email asking about your latest trip to Egypt. I know you did a couple of episodes on the ancient mysteries there. This person is asking, just wondering, what do you think of these strange structures over 2 kilometers beneath the Great Pyramid?
Okay, so a lot of people are asking me about this. This is claims being made by, I think, 2 Italian scientists relating to not the Great Pyramid of Giza, but the Khafra Pyramid, which is one of the other 2 pyramids. And the claims are that using synthetic aperture radar, SAR, which is an aerial-based radar system where you scan the ground with radar, they've somehow been able to penetrate the ground 2 kilometers deep to show what appear to be coils of some kind running 2 kilometers underground under the Khafra Pyramid. Now, look, it's a great story, and there are these sensational images that have been generated as a result of that alleged SAR, synthetic aperture radar imaging. We know quite a lot about SAR in Australia, and I've spoken to mining people in Australia this week who use SAR for the purposes of finding mineral deposits in remote parts of the Australian outback. And I'm not saying it's not true, because apparently the scientists who are proponents of this idea say that they've been able to develop a system that can use the SAR in ways that have never been used before. But what I can tell you is there is a high degree of skepticism from the SAR experts, two of whom I've spoken to here in Australia, who are probably leading world experts on synthetic aperture radar. They frankly scoffed at the idea that any system could go down as far as 2 kilometres underground. And more importantly, one of them knew about the fact that there have been aquifers found underneath the pyramids, underneath the Giza plateau, and they said that any water would hinder or obstruct any such visualizing of what's underneath. So they're very, very skeptical. I balance that with the fact that I've spoken to people who are experts in remote viewing, a highly controversial and much long discredited attempted telepathic or psychic technique that involves the ability to somehow use the human mind to see into areas remotely. And those remote viewers have told me that there are things underneath the Giza plateau. So, look, frankly, the only way is to investigate this physically on the ground. And guess who controls access to the underground parts of the pyramids? Zahi Hawass, one of the principals of the Egyptian Antiquities Department, who is not a person known to believe the synthetic aperture radar claims and who has been very quick to dismiss them out of hand. I think in the interests of openness and transparency, why couldn't Dr. Hawass just allow an independent study to come in and attempt to verify on the ground the claims that are being made by these scientists? The other thing I've got a problem with this claimed scientific research is they appear to have published their press release first before putting their article and their actual data up to objective peer review. It would have been better, I think, for them to demonstrate the efficacy of their SAR system on an area where we know there is something underground, like a cave system or perhaps some kind of underground facility, and then see how much we can actually see. Because if SAR was actually this good, don't you think a lot of us would have used it to look for the deep underground military bunkers that I do know exist in certain parts of the continental USA, and which I am very actively investigating? And I wish those technologies did have those abilities. And if those Italian scientists do have a capacity to go 2 kilometers underground, count me in. I know where I want to go. I can give you exact latitudes and longitudes.
All right. The next question, Ross, is actually for me. A viewer on YouTube has asked, Alex, they said they love this Q&A format, wondering what your stance is on UAP, NHI, and if you're now a believer due to the amount of evidence being gathered by NewsNation, or if maybe I had any type of personal experience, or if I'm skeptical. I will say I am a believer. I've always been a believer. I'm very curious, and that's probably why I became a journalist. I have been blown away, though, by NewsNation's work gathering all this information, connecting with whistleblowers, David Grusch. I think that was a huge story that we did and obviously led to a lot of work on Capitol Hill. And so I am very grateful for NewsNation and being able to be a part of this network. Ross, I do have to tell you that this is going to be our last Q&A because I am moving on to another opportunity.
Oh, no.
But I know, very sad, but some positive news. We do already have somebody who is willing to help you with these Q&As, and you know her pretty well. I'm going to add her in right now. Megan, one of your producers, is
Megan,
going to take over.
Good to see. Great, Megan. Lovely to have you on
Ross,
board.
great to see you. Again,
What Alex
I felt like
is
we
not
didn't see
revealing
enough
is
of
that
each
the
other.
men in black have decided to take her away because she's
Yes.
acknowledged that she's a believer. It's not fair. So, Megan, let's get it on the record now.
Yes.
Are you a UAP skeptic or a believer?
Well, Ross, as you and I know, there's only one thing we disagree about, and it is not UAPs and UFOs.
In fact, Megan, can I tell people?
Of course. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, they're going to get to know me, I hope.
Megan believes Megan is something of a skeptic on the moon landing, and I was appalled, absolutely appalled about that, because I've interviewed people who landed on the moon, and I absolutely believe them. I do not buy into the wacky conspiracy theories that the Apollo moon missions did not happen. And of course, speaking as somebody who talks about UFOs with certitude, I must say I'm in no position to be able to condemn you for listening to a conspiracy theory. Alex, it's been a real pleasure to work with you on Q&A, and I wish you the very, very best of luck on whatever program you're moving to. And may your belief in the UAP subject soon turn into categorical certitude and knowledge.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate this opportunity. And for all the viewers, please keep asking questions in the comments. We will continue to look over those and answer them for you.
And Megan, looking forward to seeing you next week with some curly questions. Thank you so much.
Let's not forget tomorrow and then Tuesday and Wednesday and the other day before that.
It never stops because, as we know, too many UAP stories are barely enough. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of NewsNation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.